You're watching TYT Investigates. I'm Jamia Zarzuela, and I'm here with Zoltan Lucas. Today, we're going to be talking about why everyone is up in arms about Brnovich versus DNC and the court's decision to uphold two provisions that the DNC and multiple voting rights activists claim go against the Voting Rights Act. But before we even get into the Supreme Court case, let's talk about how it got into the Supreme Court in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's a little weird that we're often not talking about the lawmakers who put forth a lot of these restrictive voting laws that have been popping up around the country. We kind of just say it's the GOP and we leave it at that. We'll mention, right, that this seems like an organized or intentional effort to suppress voters. We say it's bad, but we don't talk about specific people. And in Arizona, the person who brought the case to the Supreme Court is Mark Brnovich, and he's Arizona's attorney general. And the fight started in 2016 when the DNC sued Arizona over these two provisions. And then in 2017, the U.S. Court of Appeals saw the case, voted in favor of the DNC. And then Brnovich and Arizona's GOP, that's when they brought the case to the Supreme Court. So let's look a little at like Brnovich. He's not a Trump loyalist. He can admit that Biden rightfully won the elections. But I mean, right, it's a low bar that we now hold Republicans to sometimes.
Yeah, he's a unicorn because he believes the truth as a Republican. Hoorah, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, his opinions on voter recounts in Arizona and upholding voter restriction laws, they aren't like the most polarizing that we've heard from Republicans. But at the end of the day, right, to not fully condemn or do everything in your power to fight voter suppression efforts, um, I think to me, right, it means you're fighting for the other side. So I do think it will be interesting to see how Brnovich runs his campaign for Senate in that regard. But I mean, I'm getting like a little sidetracked. Bottom line here is Brnovich was reelected 3 years ago with the financial support of some of America's biggest companies, right? Which is what we found from looking at campaign records. Uh, it's a list. Um, Brnovich received contributions from Pfizer, Verizon, Sprint, JP Morgan, Microsoft, Comcast, Walmart, CVS, and this one's not a surprise. He also received money from the strongly conservative Koch brothers, sorry. I mean, these are all massively mainstream corporations. I mean, what did you like? What was your first takeaway from what we found?
I mean, if we're starting with Pfizer, right, who gave
Yeah,
Brnovich $3,500, but then the CEO turned around and gave his support for democracy after the January 6th riots because that's what they were, right? They were riots, but then decided to stay neutral on Georgia's new election integrity laws. May I note that these integrity laws, quote unquote, integrity laws, come from baseless claims of voter fraud. I guess I'm a little bit more surprised about the neutrality being so common with every other company that we saw. And these companies, many of these companies pledged not to give money to the 147 lawmakers who voted to overturn the 2020 presidential election results. So
yeah. A lot of them, a lot of them went so far to even just like freeze political donations for a little bit. Um, and I mean, a lot of them, right, also came out against the Georgia restrictive voting laws. Um, and so I think what this really shows is this is not a standard that we've set for these companies, right? In the last few months, they've created the standard for themselves that they want to now be held accountable um, for being in favor of voting rights and, as they say, right, protecting democracy. So I don't think it's that much. I don't think it's that much to ask for these companies to come out with statements now about donations they've made 2 years ago or 3 years ago. Because right, this is like a fight that's been going on for years. The GOP has been attacking voting rights for years now. So to make a statement now means you also want to be held accountable for things you've been doing for years as
And
like as big corporations. So I think sometimes we look at like small donations, like $500 on our list of companies that have donated to Brnovich. I think $500 is the smallest amount that some companies have donated. And you could look at that and be like, oh, what about the millions they've given to blah, blah, blah. But I think if you make a statement in support of voting rights, complacency is the same as support. I mean, $500 is enough to say that you're helping Brnovich. I mean, right, the other thing that we found is, I mean, not that we found, that's known, is this is not a one-off.
yeah,
That's
these donations aren't, like you said, these donations aren't a one-off, and they definitely add up. So I guess what you're saying is that the question isn't, are they good or bad? No, it's, are what they say aligning with their actions? And when
yeah,
you,
right. It's up to you to decide if these companies are good or bad.
but I mean, with the public citizen article that was released in April, they stated that corporations have been contributing $50 million since 2015, and including $22 million during the 2020 election cycle. Some of those
But
companies listed that gave to Brnovich.
And right, these are all companies. I mean, according to that public citizen report, um, backers of voter suppression bills got 167,000 from Comcast, 81,000 from CBS, 100,000 from Verizon, and 146,000 from Walmart. So I mean, altogether, those are big numbers. And I think the other thing, like to remember here for this case, is the outcomes, the decision that the Supreme Court made is one that we're probably going to be feeling for a little bit now. I mean, even the Justice Samuel Alito, who gave the majority opinion on the case, called the outcome guidepost for future challenges to restrictive voting laws, right? So the decision is definitely going to change the way that the Voting Rights Act is interpreted. To what extent, we still don't know for sure, right? Um, but ultimately, it is going to make it harder to challenge voting rights and voting restrictions related to racial discrimination. And I think another thing we were talking about before we started recording ourselves is like, it's pretty crazy. Is this also just shows that Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act is like not enough for us to be standing on. We're kind of pulling at strings, and this is not going to hold us up.
No, most definitely. I mean, those numbers that you were calling out for all those corporations that were donating to uh people that were in support of voter suppression laws, that ended up being what, $500,000. And when you look at what Biden said when he released a statement after the Supreme Court reached their decision,
Mhm.
he said that he was deeply disappointed in the Supreme Court and that they undercut the Voting Rights Act. And Biden being Biden, a president of hope,
Uh,
he also said it's more imperative. It is all the more, pardon me, imperative to continue the fight for the People's Act and the John Lewis Rights Advancement Act to restore and expand voter protection. In the article, we do take a deeper dive on how these corporations truly, in a sense, have aided this undercut, as Biden said, of the
in the
VRA.
end, I would also just like to say that none of these companies that we mentioned in this report and in this video responded to TYT's request for comment on their Brnovich donations, or the Supreme Court decision, or on any past commitments they made to protecting voting rights. We think they matter, but
what do you as the audience think? But most definitely, if you liked this video, if you want more content like this from TYT Investigates, then as the millennials and Gen Zers say, smash that like button and share and subscribe to TYT Investigates. Thank you for watching, and until next time.